Welcome back to the Coach's Call. Thanks for joining me. On this edition, I want to revisit the topic of Jonathan Drouin of the Montreal Canadiens. A couple of shows ago, I had brought up Jonathan Drouin, and I was talking about how he is a serviceable NHL player, how he could be a tradable commodity, and I still believe those things to be true, so I will double down on those things. When it comes to Jonathan Drouin and the perception of what he is versus what he isn't for the Montreal Canadiens, it seems to be a long story. We saw recently that he was benched by the Montreal Canadiens by Marty St. Louis. I'll get to that in a moment. As I brought up Drouin in that last segment, in that last show, there was some Montreal Canadiens fans who didn't agree with me. They don't like Jonathan Drouin. And I get it. He didn't meet whatever their expectations were as a French Canadian player, and they have their opinions that they're ensconced on. But I had one fella. This fella decided he was going to troll me and try and pick an argument with me for whatever reason. He was trying to prove that maybe he knew more than I did. He got into everything beyond hockey. He got into political accusations and affiliations and misunderstanding of rookie comparisons versus veteran comparisons. But at the end of the day, his last statement to me was something along the lines of, I like to argue, but not with someone who isn't armed. And I think that's where fella missed the calling here, because I wasn't arguing with him. Had no intention of arguing with him. I think he was arguing with himself. And other than, I brought stats to the table and information, like I usually try to do. But he just brought opinion and name calling. So I've given you more airtime than you're gonna get there, fella. So I'm done with you. And if you want to have that exchange with me, I'm looking forward to having it. But not if you're gonna name call and get ridiculous. And it's not fun for anybody. And you just look silly yourself, right? So now talk about looking silly. Jonathan Drouin gets benched because he missed a team meeting, something like he was late for he didn't miss a team meeting. He was late a couple of minutes. And I get it. Marty St. Louis, the culture you establish, hey, you're on time and this is what happens. Now, he ended up getting dressed for the game. He was supposed to sit out the game. He ends up getting dressed just based on roster situation. Somebody else couldn't play. They had to dress a player based on NHL rules. So he gets dressed and he's on the bench. But he doesn't play. He doesn't see the ice on a regular NHL shift in that entire game. He sits and watches the entire game. I'm not the coach of the Montreal Canadiens. Is that something I would have done? Maybe not. I get he was going to sit out, but to make him sit on the bench and just watch, that's harsh. And it's harsh, especially given some of the condition that Drouin overcame the last couple of years with some of his anxiety and other things. I just thought the message could have been sent a little differently. I'm a fan of Marty St. Louis. I like what Marty St. Louis does. I just didn't like, you had to put him in the lineup. I get it. Maybe you make him sit the first period, but let him see the ice. Give him one shift even, or a couple of shifts. Give him something to build on other than just sitting on the ice. And the team is going to understand that. I think they would have. Now, post game, Marty St. Louis says, "No, me and Drew are good. We had an understanding. We knew what was going on. Everything's fine." It sounds like Jonathan Drouin says the same thing. It's great that they're both towing that team, non-disruptive team party line. I don't buy into it. I don't buy it. I don't believe it. I don't have to believe it. I could be wrong. Hey, I keep saying that I could be wrong. I'll walk it back if I'm wrong. But I think that, he should have done something different. Now, parking that aside and just revisiting what Jonathan Drouin is, and I want to share this with you. Jonathan Drouin right now is getting 0.6 points per game. He's played 45 games. He's got 27 points. That's including his second goal of the season tonight as they're playing the Tampa Bay Lightning. And what I did last time is I compared him to Jesperi Kotkaniemi. I only compared him to that because, the potential upside, what Kotkaniemi signed for in Carolina, him having been a Montreal Canadian. Kotkaniemi is getting 0.5 points per game, and he's played 68 games, okay? different players, but Drouin is outperforming him. And when you talk about Drouin outperforming Kotkaniemi on a point per game basis, if I just strictly looked at number of points per game, this isn't even doing an average. Okay, this is just points over a series of games. Jonathan Drouin has 566 NHL players behind him who have played 20 games or more in points. Okay, if I look at the games played and I take it to 45, which is what Jonathan Drouin has played, 45 or more games, there are 542 players behind him in points. If I say, let me take away the defense, I take away the defenseman, I've got 426 NHL active players with 45 games or more behind Jonathan Drouin in points. Ahead of him, there's 365. He plays 17 and a half minutes per game. Who's behind him? What are some of the names? I don't know. Michael Pezzetta, Milan Lucic, Nick Bonino. Guys, there's some trades there. David Kampf, Jeff Carter, Okposo, Ryan O'Reilly, Van Riemsdyk, Anthony Cirelli. You've got some Stanley Cup champions. You've got some established players who've had some really good season. You have some energy players who were brought in. And I mean, even if you look and you say, well, Michael Pezzetta, he seems to be a fan favorite because he goes out there, he bangs along the boards, he gets the occasional goal. I like Michael Pezzetta. He's good. All I'm saying is when you compare points per game and the number of games played in points, he's behind Jonathan Drouin. So the perception of what some fans want Jonathan Drouin to be just doesn't match the reality of what he is. But that doesn't mean that he's not a serviceable NHL player. That doesn't mean he's not a tradable commodity. What would I do with Jonathan Drouin if you're the Montreal Canadiens? I'd sign him. His contract is over. I'd offer him a 1 year, $1 million, come back, hang out, play him on the third line, give him some minutes there, take the pressure off of him of that contract, take the pressure off of him of any expectations of being, the next coming of Guy Lafleur, which is I think what they wanted and what I think the expectation was when they gave up Sergachev. Get rid of whatever happened in that contract. He's no longer traded for Sergachev in that situation. He's just a re-signed player that would have been out on the free market anyways. Okay. He's had to live against the Sergachev thing for a couple of years. Sergachev won 2 cups. He's had to live against that. He's had to live against the expectations of why he was brought in. Get rid of all that. Offer him a 1 year, $1 million. See what he does. Without that additional pressure on him, and maybe he does become a tradable commodity. Maybe he just becomes a piece of the puzzle for a little while in a Montreal Canadiens uniform. I get there's not going to be fans that agree with me. That fella might not agree with me. He still may say, "Oh, you're a clown for thinking those things." You think what you want, right? I'm giving you the stats and I'm giving you the facts, and I'm saying the expectations didn't meet reality, but he isn't the worst NHL player. He's not the best NHL player. But if you take Jonathan Drouin for what he is, he's a serviceable NHL player. And that's still the coach's call. Take care, folks.